Hello guys, welcome to my channel where stories filled with revenge, moral lessons and love are told. Sit back, enjoy this story and don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any of my next stories. I still remember that Monday morning like it was yesterday. The conference room at Orion Freight was buzzing with artificial energy, the kind that usually comes before someone tries to shake things up in the name of modernizing. I had worked there for nearly 9 years, climbing from compliance analyst to director of regulatory operations. My name is Leora Stanton, and for almost a decade I have been the one who ensured that our trucks could cross state lines without a hitch, that every hazardous shipment was cleared, and that every environmental license was renewed on time. In plain terms, I was the quiet backbone that kept the company running legally. But to Kellen Rhodes, our brand new vice president of operations, I was an outdated relic. He walked in with his slicked back hair, a self-assured smirk, and a startup bro attitude that screamed arrogance. He talked in flashy buzzwords, synergy, automation, disruption, without ever understanding what it actually took to keep a logistics empire operating under 11 different state boards breathing down our necks. From the very first meeting, I could tell he thought compliance was nothing more than clerical paperwork. That morning he made his move. The leadership team was gathered around the long glass table, screens glowing with projections of growth charts he had prepared. He wore his tailored navy suit-like armor, his voice dripping with that smug confidence that made my skin crawl. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "we are entering a new era at Orion. Out with the old systems, in with efficiency. No more bureaucracy, no more wasted resources." His eyes flicked toward me, as if I were the waste he was talking about. I spoke up when the agenda moved to budget realignment. My hands were steady on the folder in front of me, though inside I was boiling. "Kellen," I said evenly, "before we talk about cutting compliance resources, you should know the Tier 3 environmental transport authorization is due for renewal in 3 weeks. Without that, none of our fleet can legally operate." He didn't even let me finish. He laughed, loud enough for the whole table to hear. "Leora, I appreciate your attention to detail. But paperwork like that isn't going to make or break us. We've got AI tracking now, we've got apps. We don't need to live in fear of state regulators breathing down our necks anymore." I felt the sting in my chest, but I forced myself to keep my voice calm. It isn't fear. It's the law. And if it expires, we'll be grounded until it's renewed. Clients don't wait around when freight is stuck. He waved me off like I was some stubborn secretary stuck in the past. "We'll handle it. I've got bigger priorities than chasing stamps on forms." His arrogance was so thick, it made the rest of the executives chuckle nervously. That was when he looked directly at me and said, "We're streamlining, Leora. And that means some roles, yours included, might not fit into this new vision." The humiliation hit me like a slap. Publicly dismissed, my expertise brushed aside as if I hadn't been the reason Orion Freight avoided millions in fines year after year. The CEO sat silently, his eyes darting between us, clearly unwilling to challenge his shiny new hire. But what none of them realized was that I had already seen this coming. For weeks, I had sensed Kellen's disdain, his careless attitude toward the regulatory maze I lived and breathed. And I had been preparing. In my desk drawer was a folder labeled simply Insurance. Inside were carefully documented timelines, renewal deadlines, email threads where I had warned of upcoming expirations, and clear explanations of what each authorization meant for the company's ability to operate. I wasn't the type to gloat or to scheme without cause, but I wasn't foolish either. That night after the meeting, I sat in my apartment overlooking the city, sipping chamomile tea while my cat curled against my leg. I opened my laptop and reviewed the Tier 3 renewal notice again. The deadline was firm. Without my signature and liaison credentials, the renewal would not go through. The state board required a named compliance officer on record, someone with experience and clearance. I was that person. Without me, they had no one. I thought about confronting Kellen again, trying to explain one last time how high the stakes were. But then I remembered the smirk on his face, the way he used me as a punchline in front of my colleagues. No. He had made his bed, and I would let him lie in it. The next morning, I called a quiet meeting with my small team of analysts who worked under me. I looked into their worried eyes and spoke carefully. Listen, there may be changes coming. If I'm not here, I need you to remember everything I've taught you. Always keep copies. Always follow the paper trail. Don't ever let anyone tell you compliance is just paperwork, it's survival. They nodded, loyal and understanding, though I could see fear flickering behind their faces. They knew as well as I did that without someone at the top to coordinate, they'd be ignored. As the days passed, I documented everything. Every ignored email, every dismissal of my warnings. I saved screenshots, I wrote memos to myself, I kept it all. And when the inevitable came, that sharp, cold email summoning me to HR at 8 in the morning, I walked in not with anger, but with a strange calm. Kellen was already there, his arms folded, his smile victorious. Leora, he said, we appreciate your service, but your role has been deemed redundant. Today will be your last day. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply nodded, handed over my badge and walked out. But before I left the building, I pulled out my phone and sent one short text to my contact at the state board. This is to inform you that as of today, Orion Freight no longer has a compliance liaison on file. I will not be renewing their Tier 3 authorization. I slid the phone back into my pocket and walked out into the sunlight, free for the first time in years. I knew the storm was coming, and for once, it wasn't mine to weather. The moment I stepped out of that building, a strange silence wrapped itself around me. It wasn't the silence of defeat, though. It is the silence that comes right before a storm, when the air grows heavy and the sky holds its breath. I knew Orion Freight was about to face a reckoning they couldn't dodge, no matter how much arrogance Kellen carried in his polished smile. At exactly 9:01 a.m., the fallout began. My phone buzzed with an alert from the state board portal, a system I still had access to view until my account was officially archived. The Tier 3 environmental transport authorization had expired. Without that clearance, Orion's entire fleet of trucks, from Chicago to Dallas, from Phoenix to Atlanta, was legally frozen. A $10 million daily operation had just turned into idle steel parked in warehouses and shipping yards. I imagined the scene inside headquarters. Phones ringing nonstop. Dispatchers reported that way stations were pulling Orion trucks off highways. Clients were furious that their deliveries had been halted. And in the center of it all, Kellen, standing red-faced, scrambling to understand why everything had collapsed in the span of an hour. My old teammate, Marin, called me in a panic even though she knew I no longer worked there. Her voice trembled. Leora, they're screaming at us. The state board sent an immediate suspension notice. They want to know why the liaison isn't responding. They're asking for your name, your credentials. I closed my eyes and inhaled slowly. Marin, there's nothing you can do. I warned them. I left everything documented. This is not on you. She whispered. He told us compliance was just paperwork. He told us the system would handle itself. Her words carried equal parts fear and disgust. In the background, I could hear shouting executives clashing, the CEO demanding answers. And then she hung up quickly, her loyalty torn between her team and her job. I didn't pick up the next calls. Not from Orion's main line, not from numbers I didn't recognize. I brewed myself coffee instead, opened the balcony door, and let the city's sounds wash over me. The chaos was theirs now, not mine. By noon, industry news outlets were already reporting on Orion Freight's suspension. Headlines spread across LinkedIn feeds. Major logistics operator halts operations amid compliance failure. Competitors smelled blood in the water. Clients scrambled to reroute shipments through rival carriers. Shares dipped fast, investors demanding explanations. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed with an entirely different type of attention. Recruiters. Executives from rival firms. Even an old professor who had once told me I had the patience of a chess player. They all wanted to talk. They all understood something Orion had never appreciated, that regulatory mastery isn't red tape. It's survival. Later that evening, while I stirred soup on my stove, my phone finally lit up with a call from the CEO himself. I let it ring until voicemail kicked in. His voice, usually calm and measured, cracked with urgency. Leora, this is Randall. Please, we need to talk. I wasn't aware Kellen had. Look, we need you back. We'll make this right. Just call me. But I didn't call back. The next day, photos began circulating online of trucks lined up like abandoned soldiers outside Orion's Dallas hub, drivers leaning against their rigs with crossed arms and cigarettes, stranded because paperwork hadn't been handled. The memes followed soon after. When your VP thinks compliance is optional, slapped over pictures of empty warehouses. Social media ate it up. I laughed, not out of cruelty, but out of justice. For years I had carried the invisible weight of responsibility, ensuring disasters like this never happened. I had begged for recognition, for resources, for respect. Instead, I had been mocked, dismissed, and discarded. And now, stripped of me, Orion was exposed. A few of my colleagues sent texts late at night. Short, remorseful confessions. We should have spoken up for you. You were right all along. I'm sorry I laughed when he dismissed you in that meeting. I didn't blame them. People cling to power, even when it's corrupt. But their regret was proof enough that truth always finds a way to surface. Meanwhile, the state board wasn't merciful. Without a compliance officer on file, Orion faced daily fines. The backlog of shipments piled into the millions. Clients traitent le suite. Insurance companies raised red flags. And still, Kellen fought to keep his job, spinning excuses about unexpected system failures. By the end of the week, word leaked that the CEO had stripped him of operational authority, but the damage was irreversible. Orion's reputation was in ashes, burned not by malice, but by arrogance. I spent those days in peace. Morning walks through my neighborhood. Afternoons reading novels I hadn't touched in years. Evenings sipping tea as I watched the skyline glow. My world had grown quieter, calmer, freer. And all the while, I knew Orion's empire of steel and pride was collapsing under its own weight. Then one Friday afternoon, while I was folding laundry, my phone chimed with an unfamiliar number. A woman's voice introduced herself as Clarissa Holt, Senior Vice President of Operations at Meridian Transport, one of Orion's fiercest competitors. Her tone was confident, but also warm. "Leora," she said, "we've been following the situation at Orion closely. We know what happened wasn't your fault. In fact, we know you were the only reason they lasted as long as they did. We'd like to meet. We have a VP position open, and I think you're the perfect fit." I pressed the phone tighter against my ear, my heart beating with both excitement and relief. Finally, someone saw me for what I truly was, not a clerk shuffling papers, but a strategist keeping empires afloat. I agreed to meet her the following week. And as I hung up, I glanced toward the folder still sitting on my desk at home. The insurance I had once built to protect myself had transformed into evidence of my worth. Orion Freight could sink in its own ignorance. My horizon was widening, brighter and more promising than ever before. The following week, I walked into the glass tower of Meridian Transport with my head held high. Their headquarters glistened with the kind of energy I hadn't felt in years, steady, ambitious, but not careless. Clarissa Holt met me in the lobby herself, a small gesture that already spoke volumes. She wasn't too busy to greet someone she valued. Her handshake was firm, her smile genuine. "Leora, welcome. I've been looking forward to this." Upstairs, in a sleek conference room overlooking the city, I laid out my history. Not the polished version Orion had plastered across their corporate site, but the real one. The sleepless nights spent combing through renewal statutes, the battles fought to keep shipments legal, the warnings ignored by executives too blinded by short-term profit. I expected the usual polite nods, the thin smiles of people pretending to listen. But Clarissa leaned forward, eyes sharp, asking questions that told me she understood every risk, every nuance. By the end of our conversation, she slid a folder across the table. Inside was an offer letter: Vice President of Regulatory Operations, full autonomy, a team at my discretion, and a salary that not only matched but doubled what Orion had ever paid me. My throat tightened, not from greed, but from the validation I had craved for years. They didn't just want me, they respected me. When I left that building, contract in hand, the late afternoon sun bathed the streets in gold. For the first time in months I felt light. Not the brittle light of survival, but the steady glow of triumph. Meanwhile, Orion's downfall deepened. News broke that the state board had uncovered years of deferred issues, compliance loopholes I had patched quietly. Battles I had fought behind closed doors. With me gone, every crack widened into a canyon. The fines multiplied.
Clients défectaient en masse.
Even their most loyal partners started pulling contracts, unwilling to gamble on a company so recklessly led. The most bitter report came on a Tuesday morning. Orion's flagship contract with a multinational retailer was canceled outright. The deal had been worth tens of millions annually. Without it, Orion's financial stability cracked like thin glass under pressure. A former teammate, Jonah, called me late that evening. His voice was heavy, broken. "Leora, it's over here. They've laid off half the operations staff. Kellen's gone fired. People are scared. They're saying bankruptcy isn't far off." I listened quietly, a mix of sadness and vindication in my chest. I didn't want innocent employees to suffer, but I couldn't ignore the justice in what was happening. An empire had gambled on arrogance, and it had lost. At Meridian, I wasted no time. My first weeks were filled with building a compliance framework so airtight it impressed even the state regulators who reviewed it. I trained my new team not to see compliance as paperwork, but as the lifeline of every truck on the road. I poured into them everything I had learned from my years of being dismissed, patience, precision, and the courage to speak truth, even when it was unpopular. Clarissa often stopped by my office, sometimes just to ask how I was settling in, other times to drop news of another client praising our meticulous operations. "They notice, Leora," she told me one afternoon. "You've turned what most companies fear into our greatest strength." Months later, I stood on a stage at an industry conference, the keynote speaker for a panel on sustainable compliance in modern logistics. Hundreds of professionals watched as I spoke, my slides glowing behind me, my voice steady and confident. When the session ended, people lined up to shake my hand, to ask for advice, to thank me for showing that compliance could be a shield, not a burden. As applause echoed in my ears, I thought back to that humiliating morning in Orion's conference room. Kellen's smirk, the CEO's silence, the laughter of executives who thought my warnings were paranoia. And I smiled not with bitterness, but with peace. They had underestimated me, discarded me, and in doing so, they had destroyed themselves. The final blow to Orion came 6 months later when the bankruptcy announcement hit the news cycle. Their assets were liquidated, their reputation in tatters, their name now synonymous with failure in every logistics circle. Articles dissected their collapse, and almost every analysis pointed back to one fatal decision: firing their director of regulatory operations without understanding the cost. I didn't celebrate. I didn't need to. My victory wasn't in their ruin, it was in my rise. I had rebuilt, I had risen higher, and I had proven my worth where it was truly seen. And so, as I sit here tonight, the city lights twinkling outside my window, I tell you this story not just as revenge but as a lesson. Never let anyone convince you that your role, your voice, your knowledge doesn't matter. People will try to silence you, to diminish your worth, to call you replaceable. But the truth always waits, patient and unshakable. To everyone listening, if you've ever been dismissed, mocked, or underestimated, remember my story. Sometimes the best revenge isn't shouting or fighting back. Sometimes it's walking away, letting arrogance collapse under its own weight, while you climb to heights they never imagined for you. And that is how I turned humiliation into triumph, how their arrogance became my ladder, and how silence became the loudest answer of all.
Moral lesson.
Friends, if there's one thing I want you to take away, it's this: respect your own value even when others don't. I was fired publicly, humiliated, treated like I didn't matter, but deep down, I knew my worth. And that knowledge became the seed of my comeback. Life will always bring people like Kellen, loud, arrogant, dismissive. But power without wisdom always collapses. Don't waste your energy trying to convince those who refuse to listen. Protect your peace, guard your dignity, and trust that the truth will rise when the time is right. If you're in a place where you feel unseen, don't give up. Document your work, prepare your own insurance, and stay ready for your opportunity. The door that shuts in your face often pushes you toward the one that will open to honor you. So stand tall. Be patient. And never forget, your silence, your discipline, your persistence, those can be the sharpest forms of revenge. Thank you for staying with me through this story. Please like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, and comment below what lessons you've learned. Your story might inspire someone else's comeback too.